If the Battlefield franchise is iconic for anything, it's large-scale maps full of vehicles, infantry, and sandbox mayhem. Occasionally, different games in the franchise stray a little too far away from this design pillar, and in doing so, I think they lose a core element of what makes Battlefield so great. So today we're going to take a look at the franchise's top 10 big maps from Battlefield games and what made them so iconic. Starting off at number 10, we have Sinai Desert. This map was an incredible showcase of scale and atmosphere. The beating sun overhead and bleak, dry landscapes truly make the environment feel hot and hostile. Like if the enemy doesn't kill you, the heat might instead. It had a fantastic layout with large open deserts and pockets of buildings and natural terrain that funneled infantry into tight combat areas. There was also some fun little gimmicks like this massive collapsing rock bridge. The open space in the desert was perfect for cavalry players to engage tanks in each other, and it just gave you a lot of kind of vehicular freedom in certain parts of the map. The rolling sandstorm really changed up the open desert combat in an interesting way, making tank drivers far more vulnerable and giving infantry a little bit more of an upper hand. And when the chips were down for one team, the armored train behemoth would roll through the center lane of the map, turning it into a full-on war zone. Number 9 might be a controversial pick, but Battlefield 2042's Exposure is one of the most vertically ambitious maps that DICE has ever created. I would say even more so than Domovan Peak. From clifftop firefights to canyon battles and cliffside base sieges, the layout of this map was predominantly vertical, and it still managed to fit jets and helicopters throughout the whole experience. And 2042's crazy specialists actually complemented the map nicely, using Sundance's wingsuit to dive off of a cliff, land on a rooftop helipad carved into the side of a mountain, and secure an objective while helicopters take shots at you. It was freaking cool every time. Now, at launch, 2042 was in a rough spot, to say the least, facing heavy criticism, especially from its more empty, somewhat lifeless feeling maps. When Exposure came along with Season 1, it felt like there could be a real turning point for DICE. It gave players real confidence that the team could still deliver compelling content even within the controversial 2042 framework. DICE went on to deliver a lot of great new maps for 2042, but Exposure still remains one of the standout experiences. Circling back to Battlefield 1 for map number 8, we have St. Quinton Scar. This was the first map many of us played during the alpha for Battlefield 1, and it introduced one of the most memorable moments in gaming, watching a massive airship crash in fiery glory, often onto the village below, permanently and dynamically altering the map flow. St. Quinton Scar is one of those rare maps that does everything well. Vehicles have plenty of room to operate around the outskirts, while infantry benefit from the trenches, craters, and buildings that create pockets for intense firefights. It also played incredibly well across the more linear modes. In operations, especially the opening phase where defenders hold the trench network, it felt like a real, authentic World War I experience that then evolves into a much grander open scale. That progression from the trenches to the ruined buildings to the open fields might be one of the most quintessential operations experiences, and frankly, maybe one of the best Battlefield experiences that the franchise has ever had. At number 7, we're returning to the desert with one of Battlefield's old warhorse iconic maps, and that is Operation Firestorm. Introduced in Battlefield 3, Firestorm quickly became legendary, especially for players who loved aerial combat. The map offered huge open airspace, and it left many of the objectives completely exposed. Meanwhile, oil structures and the industrial buildings provided some cover and flanking routes for infantry and vehicles, but a talented pilot could absolutely rack up some kills on this map. It was also a favorite for snipers, with massive mountains near each team's deployment zone, giving snipers a clear line of sight across most of the map and not a lot of enemies to have to worry about. At number 6, we have Battlefield 5's Ewokima, also made in Battlefield 1942, but I'm going to focus on the latest edition of this map. It is one of the coolest renditions of a real-world Battlefield I've ever seen in the franchise. In the breakthrough mode, the attacking team launches from a naval fleet, storming the beaches against entrenched Japanese defenders. It's brutal, chaotic, and sometimes frustrating, but it 100% succeeds in making you feel like you are part of a massive military siege. siege. As the battle moves inland, the map's design masterfully creates some great combat flow. What could have been a flat, open space that's not fun to fight in instead is a complex network of trenches, caves, cliffsides, and fortified positions. There's detailed bunkers, many underground tunnels, and even battle pickups like flamethrowers and katanas, which add a strong sense of time and place. The Pacific Update overall was a turning point for Battlefield 5. It really showed that leaning into iconic World War II battles was absolutely the right move for the team, and Ewokima stands out as one of the most authentic feeling maps in the game, or any Battlefield game for that matter. At number 5, we have Caspian Border, a true hallmark of this franchise, filling servers through Battlefield's golden years. First introduced in Battlefield 3, it quickly became one of the series' defining sandboxes. It has everything: tanks, jets, helicopters, transport vehicles, dense forests, open fields, a massive radio tower, and the Battlefield 4 version had a giant concrete wall running through the middle that could be destroyed in areas to open up new points of attack. What makes Caspian Border so special is how naturally it supports every single playstyle in the game. Vehicles have plenty of room to move without the map feeling empty, while infantry fights break out in the forest and the denser checkpoints. And as the match progresses, destruction changes the layout in really meaningful ways. The forests get leveled, cover disappears, and the vehicles become even more dominant. Custom servers would inflate the ticket counts, allowing the matches to last far beyond the intended time, making this power shift even more dramatic. By the end of the round, a nicely covered map could turn into a wide open killing field. It was a truly evolving Battlefield. And of course, the iconic radio tower collapse, one of Battlefield's most memorable moments that was punched up even further for Battlefield 4. At number 4, we have Montigrapha, and Battlefield 1 really had no shortage of incredible maps, but Montigrapha stands out for feeling massive while still maintaining a strong mountainside identity. Set across the Italian Alps, the map is packed with fortifications, winding roads, cliffside trench networks, and heavily defended bunkers. The verticality and natural beauty of the landscape truly define it. Fighting uphill against entrenched defenders creates constant pressure, and every section of the map feels like its own separate battlefield. Vehicles play a role, but they never dominate because the terrain is so restrictive. Infantry, on the other hand, have countless routes and defensive positions to work with. And when the airship Behemoth crashes down across the mountain, well, it only adds to the incredible chaos. Montigrapha is gritty, cinematic, and a perfect example of Battlefield blending spectacle and scope with strong map design. At number 3, we have Gulf of Oman. Few maps in Battlefield history have had such a storied legacy. Originally introduced in Battlefield 2 as the first demo map, Gulf of Oman was quite literally the battlefield where players were first introduced to a modern Battlefield experience. I still remember flying my first Battlefield helicopter on this map, realizing that we are entering a whole new era of Battlefield aerial power. Gulf of Oman was later reimagined for Battlefield 3 and 4. The layout is a massive coastal sandbox with beaches, highways, urban areas, and open desert, all connected in a way that gives every class and vehicle something really fun to do. Even those little rib boats that could be used in the rivers to sneak around and backcap objectives. The pacing was incredibly dynamic. One moment you're engaged in long-range vehicle combat, and the next you're clearing buildings block to block in the city. It's got carrier-launched amphibious assault vehicles, helicopters fighting over the shoreline, and a challenge of pushing from open beaches into the dense urban objectives. And it all worked and masterfully showcases every element of Battlefield gameplay in one single map. At number 2, we have a fantastic big map, but also one of the best maps in the Battlefield franchise, period, and that is Parasol Storm. And if we're talking about spectacle and scale, this map is just hard to beat. Introduced in Battlefield 4, it elevated island warfare with one of the most memorable dynamic events in the series. A massive storm rolls in, waves crash violently, visibility drops, and a destroyer runs aground, completely reshaping the battlefield. But Parasol Storm isn't just about its incredible visuals, it's also mechanically excellent. You've got naval combat with netcode synchronized wave physics, air combat overhead, and infantry engagements across the islands and connecting bridges. Everything blends together naturally with both scale and beauty. Like Caspian Border, the map evolves from over time. Early on, it feels like an open naval battlefield, but as the match progresses and the storm rolls in, affecting visibility and increasing the waves, making it harder for boats to dominate, the infantry combat becomes more intense. I don't know how DICE made an island hopping map that played so well, but Parasol Storm is one of the most impressive maps across any of the games when it comes to its spectacle and scale. Now, before we get to number 1, just remember this list could be in a lot of different orders, but I think you know which one I have saved for the top. Wake Island. There really was no other choice here. Wake Island is Battlefield royalty. From its origins in Battlefield 1942 to its modern reimaginings, it's remained the gold standard for large-scale map design. It's also the first Battlefield that players ever got to experience, as it released with the early demo for Battlefield 1942. The layout is simple but brilliant, a curved horseshoe island chain with airfields, beaches, and fortifications that naturally create flow and balance. Every vehicle has an important role. Air combat matters immensely. If one team ends up dominating the air is going to kill all the tanks and infantry. In turn, the tanks can sway the infantry battles, and the transport vehicles are key for moving infantry squads around the map quickly. And what makes Wake Island so timeless is just how well it implemented that rock, paper, scissors gameplay. It introduced many players to large-scale multiplayer warfare in a way that never existed before. Back in the early 2000s, most World War II games focused on land battles. Wake Island brought the Pacific theater to life in a way that no game even thought to attempt. It was one of the first popular large-scale vehicle-centric multiplayer maps ever created, and it helped redefine what we expect from a multiplayer FPS experience. And with Battlefield 5's remake, the map feels more complete than ever. Expanded infrastructure, improved flow, and incredible spectacle. Wake Island represents Battlefield at its absolute best. What do you guys think about my best big Battlefield maps list? Would you add something to it that I might have missed? There's a lot of top choices to pick from, and I think it was really fun to go back and see how Battlefield has done scale better than any other franchise for well over 2 decades of gaming, and it's thanks in large part to its massive, excellently designed maps. Check out my video on Battlefield's craziest maps next. Some of what DICE have done is absolutely insane, and as always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.